Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are investigating how a legendary ancient monument directly inspired one of our most famous modern icons. I mean, the Statue of Liberty overlooking New York City is, without a doubt, one of the most recognizable statues in the entire world. But what if I told you that this giant green lady holding a torch high above her head is actually a direct imitation of another statue, one that is thousands of years older?
If you ever get the chance to read the poem engraved on the bronze plaque at the base of Lady Liberty, you'll see it's famously titled The New Colossus. And as that title implies, it directly references an old Colossus, specifically the brazen giant of Greek fame. We're talking about the Colossus of Rhodes, the last wonder of the ancient world. So where did this giant stand, who built it, and maybe most importantly, what actually happened to it? Let's find out.
Okay, part 1. The siege and the funding. Funding the giant. Let's get right into how the people of Rhodes managed to scrape together the cash for such an unbelievable ancient wonder. To understand this, we have to go back to 305 BCE. Following the death of Alexander the Great, the super-wealthy merchant city of Rhodes just wanted to stay neutral in the massive succession wars that broke out. Well, that didn't sit well with the invaders, led by a guy literally named Demetrius, the taker of cities. He attacks the island and talk about a staggering imbalance of forces. Demetrius brings 40,000 soldiers, 200 warships, 180-foot battering rams, and these massive 6-story siege towers that took thousands of men just to push. Against all that, only 7,000 Rhodian defenders. But here's the thing, the Rhodians had highly fortified walls, incredible cunning, and an absolute ironclad determination to defend their homes. They held out for an entire year, completely humiliating the invaders until Demetrius finally just threw his hands up and signed a peace agreement in 304 BCE.
Now here is where it gets crazy. When those defeated invaders finally fled, they were in such a hurry that they left all their massive siege weapons just sitting in the dirt. So the Rhodians, being savvy merchants, took this abandoned equipment, melted down the metal, and sold it for 300 ancient talents. To put that into perspective for you, that is a staggering $360 million in today's US dollars. Overnight, they went from under siege to free, independent, and incredibly rich.
Which brings us to part 2, forging the giant, building the sun god. Because instead of saving that massive windfall or using it for mundane city repairs, the city made a very bold choice. They decided to build a massive statue of their patron sun god, Helios.
And when I say massive, I mean standing at an estimated 108 feet tall, or about 70 ancient cubits. This monument absolutely rivaled the height of Lady Liberty herself from heel to head. The Rhodians hired a local sculptor, a guy named Chares of Lindos, for the job. Their goal was simple. They wanted to prove that their god, who they truly believed delivered them safely through the siege, was a force to be reckoned with. But as you can imagine, building something this massive in ancient times required a completely groundbreaking new method of construction. You couldn't just cast something like this in a giant mold. It took a grueling 12-year construction process designed by Chares. Step 1, they built a towering inner framework out of iron bars. Step 2, they filled that core with massive stones and boulders, to keep the entire structure from tipping over in the wind. Step 3, they riveted large hammered bronze plates together for the outer skin. And finally, to actually reach the top, the workers built massive earthen mounds around the statue, slowly working their way up little by little. It was a sweaty, multi-million-dollar labor of love constructed, quite literally, from the repurposed weapons of their enemies.
So, what did it actually look like when all the dirt and scaffolding was finally cleared away in 280 BCE? Let's dive into part 3, fact versus fiction, debunking the myths.
If you Google the Colossus of Rhodes right now, you are almost always going to see a picture of it straddling the harbor, right? With ships passing right beneath its legs and it's holding a flaming torch. Well, actually scratch that. None of that is true. Despite what Renaissance art, centuries of historical telephone, and even Shakespeare tell us, the statue never straddled the harbor. Structurally, it just wasn't feasible. That myth actually started with an Italian visitor in 1395 who basically fell for a local legend. On top of that, our ancient sources give absolutely zero indication that it ever held a torch, and there certainly wasn't a winding viewing staircase inside that let you look all the way to Egypt.
But what it likely did look like is fascinating. Archaeological evidence from ancient Rhodian coins tells us the face of Helios featured what's known as the Lysipian gaze. This was a wildly popular Hellenistic style. Think tousled hair, slightly parted lips, and a head tilted dramatically upwards toward the heavens. It was heavily associated with Alexander the Great. In fact, Chares' teacher was Alexander's personal sculptor. So the face of this giant sun god was essentially a heroic mashup, a tribute to the god Helios, visually cosplaying as the legendary conqueror Alexander the Great. And he would have stood completely naked, displaying this hyper-powerful athletic physique, basically serving as the ultimate ancient Mediterranean body standard.
Also, the bronze skin of the statue would have changed drastically over its lifetime. Think about it, when it was unveiled, the metal would have been this gleaming orange or gold shining brilliantly in the Mediterranean sun. But because of oxidation from the salty ocean air, a chemical process called patina, it would have turned crimson red after a year, then a dark brown, and eventually to a light bluish green. Yes, that is the exact same chemical progression the Statue of Liberty went through. So towards the end of its life, this ancient colossus was green, and honestly probably topped off with seagulls nesting right in the spikes of its solar crown.
Unfortunately, the vibrant life of this majestic monument was cut brutally short. Part 4. An earth-shattering end, a short-lived wonder.
Shockingly, for a wonder of the world, this statue was incredibly short-lived. It was completed in 280 BCE, but just 54 years later, in 226 BCE, a devastating earthquake struck the island in the middle of the night. The tremors were so violent they collapsed temples and homes all over the city. The colossus snapped right at the knees and came crashing to the ground with this monstrous groan of twisted metal. Literally in a matter of seconds, it went from the tallest statue in the world to a heap of bronze rubble.
But even broken, the sheer scale of those ruins was awe-inspiring. The city actually received offers from foreign kings to pay to rebuild it, but they declined because an oracle warned them that the statue falling meant they had somehow displeased the sun god. So they just left it there. For 800 years, the shattered giant sat right there on the ground as the ultimate ancient tourist trap. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder actually wrote about it after hearing eyewitness reports, saying few men can clasp the thumb in their arms and its fingers are larger than most statues. That is just wild to think about.
Its physical history ends really abruptly in the 7th century. In 653 CE, a Muslim caliph captured the city of Rhodes. The remains of the sun god were unceremoniously melted down for scrap and auctioned off. It was bought by a nameless Jewish merchant from Edessa, loaded onto the backs of 900 camels, and bizarrely carried away into the eastern desert. And just like that, the metal disappeared from the historical record forever.
And because it was cleared away so thoroughly, to this day, we still don't know exactly where the statue stood in the city of Rhodes. Some historians think it was by the main temple of Helios, or maybe high up on the Acropolis, but there's a highly compelling theory that points to the fort of St. Nicholas. It's a 15th century military fort that sits at the end of a natural mole in the harbor. Why there? Well, its foundations are incredibly fine and intricately cut, way too complex for just a simple medieval fort. Furthermore, there are these oddly sized boulders strewn in the surf below that might just be the stone guts once used to keep the bronze giant standing. If this theory is true, a modern lighthouse now stands in the exact same spot old Helios did over 2,000 years ago.
But here's the best part. Even though the metal vanished, the cultural DNA of the Colossus of Rhodes is still all around us today. Part 5. The Surviving Legacy. Cultural DNA of Helios.
You see, the distinct solar crown of radiant light and flame worn by Helios didn't disappear with the scrap metal. It directly influenced the Roman sun god Sol Invictus. From there, it served as the literal prototype for the crowns of medieval European kings. It even transitioned into Christian artwork, inspiring the glowing halos floating above angels, and it can be seen in a secret mosaic tomb under St. Peter's Basilica, featuring one of the earliest depictions of Jesus Christ riding a chariot across the sky. And of course, it came all the way full circle to inspire the famous spiked crown worn by Lady Liberty in New York Harbor.
Ultimately, the story of the Old Colossus leaves us with a fascinating reflection on ambition and legacy. The Hellenistic period was an age where people dreamed incredibly big. If you could dream it, you could build it. But they also learned the hard way that everything, even 108 feet of solid bronze and iron, eventually comes tumbling down. Yet, as we've seen today, an idea can outlast the metal it was forged from. It leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. What modern monuments of today will survive in our cultural imagination long after they tumble to the ground? Thank you so much for exploring with me today.